Yeah, Dr. Aravind, we hope that we have your consent also for this recording.
Yes, yes, yes. No worries.
Thank you. Thank you.
Hi, Dr. Arvind. Can we see you?
Hello, sir. So that's what there's some issue with the video. It
Okay,
keeps
okay,
saying
right.
that video is not working.
Okay.
So that's the
Anyway, nice to
problem.
meet you.
I started late. Yeah, I'm really sorry. Yeah.
That's okay. So yeah, so the first question we'll look into is a very fundamental one. So what is mind? I would want both our panelists to like weigh in on this. Let's start with Dr. Bhide.
Right. So the question actually read as, can you define, please define mind in one line? Now, if the question had remained like that, I would have said, no, I can't define it in one line.
Yeah.
But thank you for dropping that one line clause over there. I think we all know what the mind is. Mind is basically the collective title given to faculties that are usually in the realm of our being cognizant of things. Now, that includes our ability to think, first of all, to perceive, and perceive both at a psychological plane as well as at a physical plane, our various senses, our ability to reason, our ability to think, our ability to emote, our ability to behave, and our ability to control and modify the behavior, certainly within limits. The collective name for all these faculties is mind. I am a little amused by this question and wondering why it came up at all, but never mind. It's perfectly legitimate to ask this question, and this is my answer to that particular question. Now, we can further divide the mind into, and this is postulated, never adequately proven, but we all tend to believe that there is a conscious mind and there is a subconscious mind. Some people will also attribute another aspect of the mind called the unconscious. Now, that's a slightly dodgy realm, but let us say there is something we are all the time aware of and some things which are buried deep inside us which come up on certain occasions, typically in the face of trauma, but it can be in other situations as well. That something which you were not at this moment aware of comes up after a few minutes or hours or days, and that is the subconscious mind.
Okay, so Dr. Arvind, do you have something to add to what Dr.
I
Bhide has
completely
mentioned?
yes. Yes, I completely agree with Bhide, because it is something which is, asking what is science, It is something really a vast area. And of course, as Sir was talking about the various dimensions of mind, I would just try to reiterate on that point what he has spoken about, like, something which we as human beings have a control if we are training ourselves to do that, which is something very important. That is something which we as you as students as well as human beings need to understand that, so that a lot of answers for whatever the psychosocial problems what we have around can be answered by having our mind in control. That part I would like to add as part of this question. Yeah.
Thanks to both of the panelists for interesting answers to this interesting question. So the next question is how to deal with loneliness on a daily basis. To give a little more context to this question, I think in IISc it is even more of a relevant problem because most students, like we have individual rooms for each student, and research work can in general be very isolating. So loneliness seems to be a problem that students commonly face. So how do we deal with that? So Dr. Arvind?
Yeah. See, actually, the word loneliness, it doesn't mean that you're physically being lonely. You were giving example of by having an individual room. Just being physically alone doesn't induce loneliness. There are instances where people tell us, though I'm being with group of people, group of friends, family, I feel lonely. So first we need to understand the reasons behind it. Basically, any issues. Is it that some people say that I'm basically an introvert, so I don't feel like talking. It's fine, but people who are very active, who are actually interacting with people, suddenly when they have this feeling of loneliness, definitely it is based on individual basis issues, that though the outcome of that particular problem is loneliness, the issues vary from person to person. For example, the loneliness could be because of not getting used to the situation. For example, the person who have joined first year, they might have this kind of thing. Or for some people, it could be because of failures in exams, or not able to face the current situation as such. Or for some people, because of the issues which is going back in the family. Lot of reasons. So being lonely, how to deal with loneliness, first let us understand what are the reasons for loneliness, and that when we address that source successfully, probably we would be able to get out of that loneliness. Seeking help for these in these situations with whatever the team you were talking about, or the experts who are there, or even to your friends, that will help us to at least find out the reasons first, and then seek support, which will help us to deal with that loneliness in a positive way. Otherwise, the negative or the negative way of handling loneliness, sometimes we get too much into our social media. That itself again will, make us more lonely. So instead of that way of dealing with it, we can take the help of our friends or the experts who are involved with the team. So that will help us to manage it in a positive way. Yeah,
Dr.
sir.
Bhide, do you have something to add to this?
Actually, that's a huge topic, loneliness, and I think Aravind has done a good job of addressing it. I think it's important if you have a feeling of loneliness. Now, that is something which is bothersome, but I don't know how much of a consolation it is. But Vivek Murthy, who was the Surgeon General of the United States in Obama's administration, he coined the term epidemic of loneliness because he felt a large number of people in the United States, and especially late teenagers and young adults, had such a profound sense of loneliness in their lives. And I think the way to overcome loneliness is something when you cannot overcome it overnight. If you have a sense of loneliness, then you need to do something about it by cultivating adequate social skills and having a circle of friends with whom you exchange ideas, that you are willing to help out and take help when necessary, as Arvind mentioned. So this is a give and take matter, that how loneliness can be tackled. People who don't have good social skills and who have a very restricted range of social interaction are the ones who are much more likely to be victimized by loneliness. But why is loneliness important? Because there are lots of people who are happy being by themselves. They don't want much company. They do not wish to interact. They are functioning quite well being alone. That is solitude. And solitude is different from loneliness, because in loneliness, the person feels that I don't have anybody. I don't have anybody to relate to. And that predisposes to a number of illnesses, both psychological and physical. We know that people who have a high degree of a sense of loneliness are much more prone, for instance, to gastrointestinal disease and to cardiovascular disease. It is also, of course, commonplace to know that loneliness very commonly accompanies psychological conditions such as anxiety and depression, and also certain type of personality disorders. So that is why it's important to combat loneliness. On a daily basis, if the question says how to deal with loneliness on a daily basis, is find somebody to open up to and say that I would like your company, and choose your companion with some discretion and with some patience. And then loneliness will hopefully be combated or dealt with in a much better way over a period of time.
Thank you for the insightful answers. I think the message to carry forward is it's not just the presence of people that is a solution to loneliness. What you need is meaningful connections. And
absolutely, there is a lovely line from a Hindi song which says "Bhide ke beech akela." That means you can be in the middle of the crowd and still feel very, very lonely.
Yes, yes. Thank you for the answers. The next question is how to manage time for physical activities. So, Dr. Bhide?
I presume this is about exercise and other physical engagements. And I think time management is an important faculty that everybody needs to cultivate adequately if you want to be functional and do well in life. So to manage time for physical activities, you must have a proper idea of a schedule. And within that schedule, you must allocate time for physical activities. That I am going to, my routine, I'll share this with you for the last 3 decades or so. I devote half an hour as far as possible to physical activity, which is mainly exercise. I make sure that I devote this time to exercise. When I engage in my hobby used to be theater, I used to make time for it, but see to it that my primary activity, that is my clinical work and my patient care and some amount of writing that I do not deprive myself of time for that. So you have to carve out time that you will devote to the physical activity of your choice. But very importantly, exercise is a fundamental and underrated faculty that we have, which we should engage in, because if you think of exercise mainly as something which rewards us with good physical health, the amount of good that regular physical exercise does for our mental activities is just unfathomable. It's huge. And do not neglect devoting time to physical activity for your good mental health. So proper time scheduling, sit down and spend time drawing out on an average, I would say. I would presume most of the people here are in their 20s. At your age, you should average roughly 45 minutes to 60 minutes an hour. Now, it's not possible to give 60 minutes on every day. So then you cull out time, and maybe you give a little more time on your free days or your weekends if they are free, so that your average works out to be 45 to 60 minutes per day. Do not mix up your schedule completely. Decide what is your primary. You're working towards your PhD or you're working towards your master's. Please make sure that those do not get neglected. But you have to draw up a schedule where you will devote this time for your physical activity.
Since we are talking about time management and devoting specific times for different aspects of our lives, there's another question that says, when I don't take a break on Sunday from my work, I start to feel very stressed the next week. But if I do take a break, it fills me with guilt, and I constantly think about how much more could have been done in that time. So could you suggest me some tips to deal with it?
Yeah, so I mean, sorry, I keep harking back to songs of Cine Hind, which people wrongly call Bollywood. So milo na tum to hum ghabraye, milo to aankh churaye, hame kya ho gaya hai. You have to make up your mind, and I think it's a very understandable thing. If you don't take a break once a week, then you start to feel stressed. So many of you may be familiar with Formula One racing. You see the speed at which these race drivers go, and periodically they need to stop. Those are the pit stops, where whatever is going, routine servicing will happen, and whatever is going wrong will have to be addressed, whether it's in the wheels, whether it's in the steering wheel, whether it's in the engine. It is quickly to be addressed. Now, here we don't have to be in that much of a hurry, but you have to take time to service your vehicle. The more you stress any system, the more servicing it needs. So if you take a day off and you end up feeling guilty if you happen to take that day off, you need to work on that guilt rather than not take that time off. What is causing you to feel guilty? There is work to be done, no doubt, and a premier institute like yours demands a lot of you. At the same time, your engine needs its servicing, and I would presume that at a minimum, 1 day off in a week is absolutely necessary, during which time you do extramural work, extracurricular activity, something that makes you feel cheerful, something that helps you to relax. And that is very important. Again, Vinay, you rightly said this relates to time management. Make sure that the rest of the time you work very hard, but that 1 day of the week you devote to your servicing your, so to say, personal engine. And deal with this guilt by telling yourself that this is absolutely necessary. Without my taking this time off, I will become more and more dysfunctional, may even lead to some form of breakdown. A breakdown doesn't have to be that you would totally go stark raving psychotic, or that you necessarily hit the bottle. So these things do happen to many people who don't service their personal machinery adequately from time to time. So this guilt is the one that the guilt is the one that needs to be addressed and undone, because you don't need to feel bad about devoting time to make sure that your engine functions much better in the long range.
Yes, I think that's an excellent tip. This is something I also realized over time. I think the problem is very common among students, particularly at IISc. And at one point, I decided that it doesn't matter how guilty I feel, I'm going to take this break anyway. And over time, I saw that the amount of guilt I was feeling had reduced. So I think, like you rightly said it, if taking a break makes you feel guilty, then guilt is something that you have to work on. So next we have a few questions about lab environments, which I would be directing to Dr. Aravind. So one of them is like, please suggest how to deal with toxic work environments. So one of my lab mates is so competitive that he can go to any extent to push others back. He's a teacher's pet, so my guide wouldn't hear a word against him. And most of the labs have at least one such person who is dead adamant to ruin others' work.
Okay. It's basically handling the competition. Then when we talk about competition, let us always keep in mind whether it is a competition in a sports field or in a lab or wherever, let the competition be little healthy. One is, of course, because of this issue, I'm sure the one whoever has raised this question, there would be definitely a sort of interpersonal issues with the person whom we are competing. If at all there is going to be an interpersonal issues, it's not a competition at all, or at least I would say it is not a healthy competition. And whenever you are feeling distressed about this, it is always better to go and talk about it to the person. For example, here in this context, it was mentioned as the guide will not listen to anybody, but what you feel, you can always talk to the guide. It's not that he will he will change his whole perspective in one session itself. But unless we keep informing things, and unless we keep telling about how we feel about what do you think is different, how do you feel about these things, it always helps other people to understand. Most of the time we think that, okay, it is their responsibility to understand my problem, but we don't always think that it's we who should go and talk about our problem. Even among mental health professionals, about the mental health professionals, the perception is that about by others, like they would be able to read everyone's mind. It is not possible for anyone to read anyone's mind unless the other person who's in the question go and talk about the issues. So make sure, and as you said, the word the competition, don't worry about the competition, what is being induced by others. Make sure it is healthy, and even in a very informal way, you can even tell that person how it makes you to feel. That to some extent make the other person to realize in the long run there can be change in his behavior, the way they put things forward. So unless we communicate those things to the persons who are involved, for which we need to have that kind of assertiveness, not an aggressive communication. Assertive communication where just in a very normal tone, you just communicate to them how do you feel. So that really helps the other person. And please remember, it is not to change the other person. It is basically to say how you feel, and what happens next will decide the next course of action. That is very, very important. It is not always good to keep things within ourselves and keep feeling bad about it.
Thank you for the answer. There's another question about toxic lab environment, and I really commend the student for talking about it. So the student says, my lab never felt like my own. Maybe it's because I'm an introvert of sorts, but still I feel alienated from my lab. And the student has mentioned a few more details which I wouldn't be reading out loud, but from the question, it seems like the student is being left out of lab even. So when everyone in the lab hangs out, the student is left out. And there are other instances that make it look like the student is being bullied. And this has gone to an extent where the student feels very stressed about the idea of even going to the lab. So I would like both the experts to weigh in on this opinion, and just let's have a discussion about like how to deal with these difficult environments in lab and like toxic conditions, because like changing these situations is not really in the control of one person, but these have the capability of affecting a person's mental health to an extent where they may not be able to work. So
Yeah, sir. Bhide sir, you can start.
So I think I have encountered this. I mean, I have had people encountering this problem come to me from your institute also. And I think it's basically important that you seek either somebody whose good intentions and wisdom you do not doubt, to try and take their help to understand how you might overcome this in your internal environment. Beyond that, it will be a good idea to take professional help, as somebody did with me, I was mentioning, that I can address the issue through my contacts in the institute to try and see that this person is not allowed to feel left out of too many of the departmental or laboratory activities. It's very sad that this person feels alienated from his lab, because in an institute like IISc, it's impossible to get ahead in life unless you attend your lab regularly and do the work assigned to you, which may deal with your dissertation or thesis, and you have to do your own experiments all the time, and staying away from lab is something which you cannot afford to do at all. So list out the instances where you have felt alienated by other people's behavior, and seek the counsel of wise people to address these issues. Now, bullying does not always happen as a deliberate action. Bullying ends up happening because many people are insensitive. They couldn't be bothered whether the others are working properly or not, whether others are feeling left out or not. Some people are brazen in their sense of humor and don't mind making teasing remarks, which can be humiliating for the person who is being teased. Please remember that the world has a substantial number of people who do not have bad intentions, who end up behaving in a bad way. So first, don't feel singled out for persecution by somebody. Secondly, start going to the lab and start working even when it is very difficult for you. List those difficulties that you face in very concrete terms. Don't just say, I felt uneasy. I felt uneasy because Professor X kept looking at me with a smirk and sizing me up in a fashion that seemed to suggest to me that I was not good enough or I was inferior. These are things that have actually happened to the case I was talking about. And then we go into something which is called cognitive therapy, that we very often perceive things which do not have enough of a rational basis. We need to start reasoning with ourselves much more logically, and that will help us come to grips with situations which will then seem less hostile to us. This is again not an overnight change that can come about. It needs a lot of commitment to come out of the shell and get back to your lab work. But for heaven's sake, don't take too long to get back to your lab.
Dr. Arvind.
Yes, and in addition to what sir was saying, during stressful situation, it is quite normal for persons to feel even the easiest thing to feel very difficult. For example, in this situation, already a person who is stressed because of a given situation, they will not be in a position to help themselves. It's not that they are capable. It's basically because of the existing stressful situation, because most of the time that's the reason why they don't take the right action. So in this situation, it is always important to take the help of others to initiate that kind of motivation, which later part we would be coming to a position where we would be able to take care of ourselves. So as students or the scholars need not always feel, if at all, if I am taking help from others, it means I'm weak. Not necessarily. Any person who's under stress definitely requires some amount of help. Of course, the sir was saying someone who's an expert or a person who's very confident towards you. So those kind of persons would be the help where you can seek that help. Then thereon you can actually, it will help that person to think clearly and that helps them to get out of that stressful situation. So once when they are out of that stressful situation, whatever the things which were looking stressful itself would disappear. So it's all about how we look at it, and how we look at it, changes to initially with the help of others, and later we can train ourselves. And that's exactly what was the answer given by us for the first question. How do we, take control of our mind despite being in a situation which was stressful?
Vinaya, I would also go so far as to say that you have a group there called the Empaths. I know Empaths emerges from empathy, and I think
Yeah.
your group should be willing to extend yourself to such individuals to help them feel less isolated, less lonely, and less inferior. I get the feeling that this individual who's facing this situation has feelings of inferiority imposed on her or him, and empaths should go some way in reassuring this person, trying to find solutions, and when you feel that this is too big a problem for you to handle, to guide them to the right professional help.
Yes, thank you for the input. I think if the student who has asked this question is in the audience right now, I would suggest them to write to us. We have a email ID which I request Sudeep to share in the group. You can either write to us or like get in contact with us, and I think we can ensure that you have someone who you can talk to, and we can definitely be there for you.
I will also share my email address if I may. It's very easy to remember. It's my name with the DR before it, drajitbhide@gmail.com. Ajit does not have an H. I receive on an average about 3 queries from institute students and faculty every week, and I address them. Some get delayed because they are complicated, but roughly I'm very willing to help by way of email, and anonymity will be necessarily preserved. Okay, I assure you that.
Could you repeat the mail ID, Dr. Bhide?
drajitbhide, drajitbhide@gmail.com.
Yeah, I'm mentioning both the panelist email ID as well as Empaths email ID in the chat.
Wonderful.
Yeah, that's good.
And in that context, Anil, I'm no longer the head of the department. I am now emeritus. I now work under a head of department who was my former student.
Okay, so let's proceed to the next set of questions. So these are about procrastination and fear of failure and all of them. So we have 3-4 questions in this. I'll club the first 2 that we have. So it says, I find it difficult to concentrate on studies unless there's some pressure or deadline. But that's not good, as normal reading or learning gets hampered. So what can I do to keep focus? And also another question that says, what is a way out from a continuous cycle of procrastination, missing deadlines, followed by a phase of despair?
Yeah.
Go ahead.
I think, yes, sir. Thank you. See, generally people think that, at least laypersons think that stress as such itself is a bad thing. Not necessary. If we don't have, for example, this one, if we don't have a program which has to be starting at 4 o'clock, definitely there was a stress for all of us, but that is what will push us to the next step. And in this case, definitely, especially in academic institutes and other places, we definitely need to have these, deadlines, which is a kind of, motivator for us to keep ourselves pushing. Only thing is, we need to see to it that it doesn't become distress for us. And obviously, if we miss out on those deadlines, obviously it will lead to the distress. And that's where I would also take some of the points which was discussed earlier about the time management. So when we are able to manage our time, just not for the physical activity, when we are able to keep things in place and we are not really bothered about the deadlines, yes, but that deadlines definitely will help us to manage that time. So when I have a deadline for next week, and when I have a deadline for some other thing, for tomorrow, it will help me to, schedule my activities accordingly. So I need not bother about the things which I have a deadline for the next week. So it will help me to focus. Unfortunately, sometimes what happens is that we just put all the things together and we really do not know which one to choose first. So obviously here I will consider this the deadline as a positive aspect for us to schedule things. And at the same time, only important thing what we need to keep in mind is when it is pushing us towards our distress. In the sense from stress, yes, it is very important for us to take it to our next level. And stress need not be there for all negative aspects alone. Even these studies or exams or all these things for our own development, yes, there will be stress, but let us understand there should be some amount of stress for us, what we call as that positive stress. Use stress to push us forward, and for which these deadlines are really important. That's the way we need to look at it, rather than looking at deadlines as something which is really very dangerous or something like that. Yeah.
So I would want Dr. Bhide to weigh in on this, but I would want to ask two other questions that we received, just so that we can look at different aspects of this problem where like people feel like about procrastination. So because it can come from a lot of places. So one is how to overcome the fear of failure. Many times I have a difficulty in starting any task because my brain gets clouded with all the negative thoughts that I'm not going to make it and this is not going to be successful, etc. And this feeling is so overwhelming that I end up procrastinating and never get my work started in the first place. So this is one question. And since we're talking about fear of failure, there's another question that says, I'm getting rejection mails from my graduate applications from various universities. And also I'm looking at statistics of Grad Cafe, which is making me really anxious and depressed. So what do I do? Yes,
Right.
Dr. Bhide, I would like to weigh
Right.
in now.
I'd like to go back to this deadline business. Effectively handled by Aravind, but I'd say one thing. Deadline, okay? Now, deadline is a line, okay? Beyond which you're going to be dead, okay? But there's a lot of space before that deadline. And that is why a lot of people do not take adequate action when there is that living space. Before the deadline comes living space. But it can be a simple matter like paying your electricity bill or paying your fees, seeing that your various bills have to be paid in time. You need to file your tax returns in time. There is almost always adequate space. This happens also with your academic work, that nobody generally imposes on you an unrealistic deadline that I want this done by yesterday. Nobody does that. They give you enough time. Now, you have to make judicious use of that time, and procrastination is a habit that grows cancerously within individuals. Once you are a victim of procrastination, the question is very nicely put, said that I'm running from one deadline to another, to another, to another. Why has that happened? Because, going back to the old wisdom, you have not learned time management adequately. I'll say this much. At the end of so many years of experience, I feel that we in the mental health profession benefit a lot from more clientele because people don't know how to manage their resources properly. And by resources, I don't really mean material resources. Time is the most important resource that is badly handled. There are plenty of good books on time management. One that I would strongly recommend is actually the offshoot of a chapter in a general book on how to be an effective person. Stephen Covey wrote this book, I think, 2 or 3 decades ago. It was called The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. And there, the section on time management, it's a part of personal victory or how to be effective in your personal life. It is called First Things First. In other words, get your priorities right, especially in the context of managing your time properly. If you manage your time properly, misery attending on your life is reduced by, I would reckon, at least 75%. A lot of things go wrong because we do not manage this resource of time properly. So they give an example which I will quickly condense. They gave a method. Everything that you do is either urgent or not urgent on one axis. On another axis, it is important or not important. Too many of us spend too much of our time doing things that are not important, and time which should be devoted to stuff that is urgent and important get inadequate attention. And when that happens, you are in for a lot of misery in your personal life. So get organized, decide, go on these 4 quadrants. If it's possible for you, acquire this book, First Things First, written by Covey, C-O-V-E-Y. And that book has helped me a lot in better managing my own time as well. I will say that much. Now, fear of failure. Fear of failure comes with some degree of what is being called the inferiority complex, and that might be based on very adverse experiences. You've had too many failures early in life, then you come into, you get into a mold where you are anticipating failure even before venturing out. And that's an unfortunate condition, which I think you need to undo with kindness to yourself, to say that I am no longer going to write myself off as a failure. I'm going to work on myself so that there is success. I am going to ask somebody senior to me, I don't know whether faculty or fellow student, who can monitor me and tell me whether I'm doing well or not. And there are a lot of people I've noticed, like the empaths, who are willing to help fellow students in a graded fashion. So this failure, which is a pre-written script, is something we need to slowly undo and get rid of. If you are primed to believe that you're going to be a failure, chances are very strong that it'll become a self-fulfilling prophecy and you will meet with failure. So do away with that script in stages, if not at once. If you can do away with it at once, that's nothing like it. But that's very, very difficult, because you've been primed by recent experience or past experience. And we need to get rid of these preconceived negative judgments about ourselves. If you meet with even a slight success where you were anticipating failure, make a small placard saying, I managed to do this. I wasn't reaching lab on time. I'm now reaching lab 15 minutes before time with a Herculean effort. Put it up as a placard on your desk. It may seem idiotically simplistic, but it goes a long way in reassuring you that achievement is on the way. And that achievement can translate to greater achievements. And do not get put off if there are minor failures along the way. What is minor? What is major? I would say start treating all lack of success, I won't say failures, lack of success as minor. Don't treat it as major. That needs an internalizing of an attitude of kindness to yourself.
Yes, Dr. Aravind, do you
Just
have...
to add on one more point with what sir was saying. Also, there are a lot of reasons why we don't start off things. One of the reasons is trying to be too perfectionist. And especially that happens with students, where, as you were saying about that competitiveness and other things. So they would be like, my first attempt itself has to be successful. So because of that fear, most of the time they just try to procrastinate. So that let me keep everything ready, let all the things be by the time passes. So whenever you start off, please don't always look for that perfectionist sort of attitude. That is what actually makes most of the work, especially at least at the student level, at least at institutes like IISc for the students, they basically procrastinate. And that, that fear of failure is basically thinking about the outcome. Why do you have to think about the outcome? Rather, think about the process, what has to be done. If you are very clear about that process, that itself will take you to the, whatever we call it as a successful outcome or something. Most of the time, we keep worrying about that outcome, and so we don't start. Let us start, and then we know what exactly would be. And we all know, as a students of sciences, we know all the inventions are not intended to be that, and then they started on something and ended up on some other better things. So let's keep that in mind, which will push us at least to start off the work, and that will give us answers for the next steps in the process. That is one more thing which people need to keep in mind.
Yes, thank you for your answers. The next question is, are there any psychological assessments that can help us identify our thoughts or actions or ingrained tendencies that are dead weight, but can be cognitively restructured? Dr. Aravind, will you?
Yeah, I will start off, probably sir can add on. See, when we are talking about psychological assessments, most of the time it is done by professionals, those who are trained for that purpose as such, including psychiatrists, clinical psychologists, psychiatric social workers. But as a screening instrument, as a self-administration tool, not basically to look into the cognitive aspects of it, but as I was telling about in the previous question, the distress part of it, psychological distress. Am I distressed, or is it a simple stress? So for that, we do have something called a self-reporting questionnaire, which has 20 items, which talks about our somatic complaints, our psychology, or our thoughts. How do we feel, emotions in the last couple of weeks or last week? How, so based on that, we can understand how distressed we are, and probably on a scale of 20, if we have scored more than 7 or 8, probably we may have to take the help of others. So that way, these are some of the self-administered tools which we can administer ourselves to understand our psychological status, and based on that we can decide on, an individual can decide on seeking help as such. Whereas other professional instruments or professional uh, assessments has to be done by the professionals, because it has to be interpreted in a set of ways which the lay persons would not be in a position to do so.
Dr. Bhide, do you have anything to add to this?
No, I think there are lots of these instruments available on the net. Unfortunately, the net is a highway where all sorts of traffic emerges, so you have to be very, very discreet. Many of them don't have adequate validity. I would endorse the idea any intelligent person can gauge where his areas of deficiency are. If we go down the list of your questions, there are questions of anger, there are questions of inferiority, there are questions of incompetence, personal incompetence. You don't really need to go through any questionnaire to decide what's going wrong with you. The instruments mentioned by Aravind are good enough for you at the moment. And if you have anything more serious, best to take professional help. I would endorse that point of view completely. There are self-administered questionnaires, for instance, to assess the severity of your sadness, depression scales. There are scales for anxiety, and those are quite good. One man who worked a lot in this area, he's no more, died quite a few years ago, a gentleman called IISc. He developed a lot of scales for assessing your own IQ, assessing your own strengths and weaknesses. Those are somewhat okay, but any intelligent person introspecting, looking at his or her own life, will know where are my deficiencies. We spent a lot of time talking about procrastination and time management. For instance, that is one area where there can be a lot of faults which we recognize and we need to start working on. So I don't think we really need psychometry much of the time. Sometimes even professionals, mental health professionals, get baffled by what might be the actual pathology this person faces. But any good, adequately clinically trained mental health professional will have information from you that helps him make an empiric diagnosis, at least, that this is what the problem is. Here's an anxiety depression problem. Here is an obsessive compulsive problem. Here is a problem with not being able to handle addiction properly. And this is what we need to do about it. So the self-administered questionnaires are a little bit like, forgive my saying it, a little bit like astrology. So you read Linda Goodman's 12 characters that are there. I prefer that people don't go in for psychometry except for entertaining themselves.
Thank you for your answer. And since we're talking about taking professional help, there's this question that says the person has ADHD or social anxiety, but they don't know what to do next. So they say, mostly I'm scared and not ready for therapy, but okay with medication. I know all this can be confirmed only after a diagnosis, but I don't know how I can take the help of a professional when I'm too scared to even talk to strangers. Can you tell me how to proceed next in a great detail?
I don't think there is any shortcut over here. I'd be fooling you and fooling myself if I were to pretend that this can be handled without professional help. ADHD and social anxiety very seldom go together, but they can. Okay. So I think you have to muster up the courage, seek a professional who's less likely to be very loud and dictatorial, and take professional help. That's the best way to handle ADHD. I'm a little what should I say? Not consternated is not the word, but surprised that somebody is willing to take medication and does not want therapy. The most common situation I encounter as a psychiatrist who's entitled to prescribe medicines is that people don't want medication. I don't want to take any pills, doctor. You tell me how to handle this without taking pills. I don't mind spending any length of time over getting better. But if you're willing to take medication and if the diagnosis of ADHD is confirmed by a clinician, then I think you should go for medication for ADHD. With social anxiety, psychological therapy is much more important than medication, in my opinion. Medication may temporarily help and may have a small role, but social anxiety needs very good social skills. People in the faculty that Aravind represents, social work, can help a lot to get you out of this situation, teach you how to socialize without feeling anxious or inferior in any way. And I think therapy would be very important in tackling social anxiety. So I understand that you're scared to talk to strangers. If there's anybody who's a close friend of yours, take that person's help to take you to therapy so that you don't feel threatened when you are seeking professional help. That's the best I could suggest at this stage.
Yes, thank you for the answers. So,
hey Vinaya,
yes.
Vinaya, don't have to thank every answer.
That's right. That's right.
Okay, let's move on then.
Yes. All right. So the next, next we'll go to a theme of questions that we received. We received different questions about handling difficult emotions like regret, anger, insecurities, and these are the emotions. But like some of the emotions that are not mentioned in the questions, but I would still want us to talk about are guilt and shame. The reason I bring that up is I think these emotions are generally they tend to isolate the person, so it becomes very difficult to handle them. So I think I would first want us to discuss about how to deal with difficult emotions before we go to the specific details of questions. And I would like both the panelists to weigh in on the matter. Dr. Aravind, you can go ahead.
Yeah. Coming to the question of feeling insecurity, most of the time a person who feels insecure may not be very clear about their own strengths and their own weaknesses. These are the persons who looks at someone and feel great about their strengths or whatever the abilities they have, and seldom they spend time to introspect their own strengths as well as weaknesses, because the moment when I accept my weakness and I start working on it, that itself will give me the strength, and that itself will be a strength of me where I analyze and assess myself to move forward. So most of the time the feeling of insecurity is basically because I don't understand about myself. When I say understand, not in depth, what are my strengths, what are my weaknesses, what am I good at, and what am I not good at, let me accept it. So let's spend more time on us rather than spending time on looking at other successes, looking at other failures, which is not in our hand. What is in our hand? Assessing our own strengths and weaknesses. That is very important, so that it is, we have dealt with so many adolescents and college going students as part of our college mental health program, where even not as a group, when we have a group sessions, they don't really come up. When they come and talk to us individually, this is what exactly we discuss with them, and then they start working on it. Since we have follow up with them, they come back to us and say like how it really works. Only thing is, like, even when we talk about the time management, one component is giving time for self. And in that giving time for self, it is not the quantity of time, it is also the quality of time what we give. And that quality of time what we give for ourselves is to basically to think about our own strengths, weakness, what we need to improve on, and then we need to act on it. that really will help us to keep ourselves away from those insecure feeling as such. And then when it comes to emotions, yes, of course, no emotions, no life, isn't it? So emotions should be there. And that's why even when we talk about managing emotion, we talk it as managing emotion rather than controlling emotion. We cannot control anger, or we cannot control sadness or happiness, but how do I manage it? And in terms of managing emotions to do with anger, we have specific things in terms of anger management techniques, where like I know how do I respond during those situations rather than reacting in those situations. How do I manage those physical reactions when I'm angry? Most of the time we don't manage those physical reactions. That itself will put us into some other stressful situation. So those are the things which we need to think of when we talk about managing emotions, rather than thinking of, okay, I should not have these emotions. That's not possible. Like, we need to accept we have emotions, but at the same time, how do I manage those in a positive way, in a healthy way? When I say healthy, what is healthy? Like physical, psychological, and social. It needs to it should lead to physical, psychological, and social wellness rather than illness. So that's the way, whatever the strategies we use, it has to lead to wellness, and these are the strategies we need to follow. And regret, yes, why do we regret and what for we regret always matters. And I feel that it is always important to regret for doing something wrong so that we don't repeat it. But at the same time, if we keep regretting for doing certain things, and if we keep doing the same thing, then probably we need to do something else for it. Like, it is not always good to, yes, I know I'm doing it, I'm regretting. For example, people who consume alcohol continuously among students, they regret. Like when they drink too much, they regret, but at the same time, again, they get back to the same sort of behavior. Here we need to cut that cycle, where they can always take the help and see how they can manage that behavior, or even that thought of feeling regretful. So these are something probably we can add after sir discusses. Whatever comes to my mind, I can discuss. Sir, please.
Sir, before we go to Dr. Ajit Bhide, since we're talking about regret, there's a specific question that we have received. I keep going back to the choices I made for the field of my study after 12th standard. These choices were made based on incomplete information, and that is making me very angry. I could have been working on something else that I really like today, but I know I can't change it. How do I deal with this? So,
That is very true. Like, is it possible for us to reset the time machine, or is it possible for us to get back to the past? We need to reason out ourselves, but it doesn't mean that we can never take up those things. Probably that would be a kind of added sort of option for you in addition to these things. For example, so many people who are doing technical courses in IIScs and IITs, they take up music as their hobby. They take up mountaineering as their hobby. Similarly, whatever was that which you could not take it up because you were not aware of those choices, since you are still interested in that, obviously that can be taken up, that can be pursued, rather than regretting for not taking that. Because throughout life, instead of regretting for it, let's also find ways to not achieve it completely with whatever the resources and whatever the possibilities. How can I take it up in addition to what I'm doing now? That's the positive way of looking at it, so that you won't continue to regret for that situation which will not take you anywhere.
yes, Dr. Bhide, I would want your opinion about like handling difficult emotions, like anger, regret, insecurity,
You also had
guilt,
mentioned shame
shame.
and guilt. Yes, I think
Yes.
these negative emotions attend on all our lives. We're never going to be totally free of them. So first, come to grips with that fact, and then I think self-monitoring is a very important exercise in moving forward from negative emotions or getting stuck in negative emotions. So I believe, I think it was one of those, I forget now whether it was Socrates or Plato or Aristotle who said that the unexamined life is not worth living. So examine your life, keep a self introspective journal. Write down every day, how did my day go today? What were the negative emotions that attended on my life? Now, somebody may have a huge problem mainly with anger, and I find anger attends on very many lives. So today, who did I lose my cool with? How did I handle that particular situation? And then there is something which I call, which I have not patented, but I have not seen anybody else come up with this. So I call it the video technique, where you look at yourself behaving in the fashion that you did. That is a bad take as far as a TV serial director is concerned or a movie director is concerned. On the other hand, could I have handled the situation? Let me reshoot this scene where I am behaving in a much more healthy fashion. I am feeling the anger welling up inside me, but I'm preventing myself from bursting out and saying nasty things or getting abusive or throwing things. I am controlling myself. I'm staring this person in the face to register my protest, but I'm walking away from the scene. And when we have done introspective journaling, we can review situations where we lost it and learn not to lose it over a period of time. My theme for today is that these changes can definitely be effected, but don't get overambitious and believe that they can be done overnight. Be patient with yourself, just as I said in a different context, be kind with yourself to conquer negative emotions to some extent and be able to, Arvind makes a distinction between control and manage. I'm not so sure I would make that distinction, but get a better hold on these negative emotions, which ultimately become undoing for ourselves. I know a number of very bright young doctors who have failed in their lives or not been able to achieve their full potential because negative emotions have got the better of them, anger being the primary one. With regard to shame and guilt, commonly, though not always, these are built into us by our early experiences. Elders in our lives, peers sometimes, push you to feel shameful, push you to feeling guilty. And I think parents more than anybody else can be responsible. I won't say they always are. It can be a teacher, it can be somebody elder in your life, but they make you feel inadequate because you've done something wrong. You horrible creature, how could you do this, is the subtext of this basic guilt. And that is something you need to, again, undo over a period of time. Look at how reasonable is your shame, how reasonable is your guilt. If they are not reasonable and they are hampering your lives, please try to undo them by writing down, writing down and then judging, is this a situation where I really need to have felt shameful or guilty? If I need not, then I am being programmed to behave in that fashion, and I must unprogram myself from getting into these traps of negative emotions.
Yes, so let's discuss anger a little more. We have many other questions about anger. So one question is how to control violent thoughts when we are angry. And another question along similar lines is how do you release your anger? And here the student mentions that while they're angry, they don't really want to hurt anyone, but like they've been suppressing that emotion for very long because the anger is towards a person they work with, and the person is terrible to many people around. So it's not directed just towards the person who has asked the question. So, but like since the student works with this person, they feel the need to like smile and let everything go. So that seems to be affecting the student quite a lot. And they're also asking, like, is it all just in my head?
It's eventually in your head, but it's in your head for a reason. It's not in your head for nothing. When you say it's all in my head, am I imagining things is the question that is being asked. I don't think in most instances it would be imagined. It would be very real. To just lighten the moment, the boss shouts at you, you come home, you shout at your wife. Wife can't get, this may sound a little sexist. The wife doesn't know how to handle it. She takes it out on the children. The elder child takes it out on the younger child. The younger child kicks the dog. This is a standard example of what we call a bad defense mechanism called displacement. You're displacing your sense of frustration onto somebody who's weaker than you, and that it goes down one particular descending chain until the weakest of the lot gets the brunt of it. You get rid of your frustration, but what's happened? Misery is there every stage of the game. Now, anger is a self-defeating emotion, and I think nobody has said it better about anger. Sorry, I'm not here to pontificate. I'm not with the present dispensation, but the Bhagavad Gita, 2nd chapter, there is a lovely set of verses in the Sita Prajna Lakshana where it says, Krodhat bhavati sammoha, sammohat smriti vibhrama, smriti bhramshat buddhinashu, buddhinashat pranashyati. In other words, anger is the beginning of the end. If you don't gain control over your anger, your cognitive functions are going to go for a 6 in the long run, and your life will become practically meaningless. That is what these shlokas are implying. And therefore, we've all understood that we need to have a command over our anger. How do we do it? Self-monitoring is the key to my mind. Be cognizant of be aware of where you're getting angry, how you are handling your anger, and what better method could there be to do it. The question also was very specific in saying, how do I avoid violent thoughts, and I would add violent actions. I deal a lot with children who have what we call externalizing disorders. That means they can't contain their emotions. They throw the TV remote, throw the mobile, kick at family members, destroy household effects, and so forth. And this is more common than you would imagine. The important thing to do is to realize that your anger may have great justification. The manifestation is not justified, but you have a reason to be angry. You need to find better ways of dealing with it. Now, if I have a violent, and I cannot but help recalling Salman Akhtar, the great psychiatrist and psychoanalyst who now is in the US and comes down and gives us lectures periodically. He says, it is very common for everybody to wish somebody dead. He was only speaking partially in jest, because all our wishes are never fulfilled. But sometimes you say that my guide is a horrible man, I wish he was dead. Or my spouse is a horrible person, I wish he was dead. Or I don't like such and such leader, I wish he was dead. I don't like my neighbor and the amount of noise he creates, I wish he were dead. Now, this is an extreme emotion, and most of us don't want anybody dead much of the time. But to allow for that emotion and say, hey, I'm not going to act on this, give yourself a pat on the back that you're able to arrest this at an ideational level itself and not allow it to manifest become manifest behavior at all. When you have these violent impulses, it is a good idea to engage in displacement activity of a healthy kind. Work out the tension that is within you in the form of physical exercise. Punching bag is the standard paradigm that we use. Go on punching the bag. You may imagine that the punching bag is the horrible parent with whom you could not get along, or the horrible spouse that you're stuck with and you think you can do nothing about. Get rid of your aggression. That does help, but to an extent. That is not the only way out, and it is not always the most effective way out. But I think self-monitoring and wanting to change for the better goes a long way in getting some governance over our negative emotions, particularly anger. But anger management really merits a day-long seminar by itself. So we may just have touched the surface just now.
Yes. So the next emotion that I would want to go into is anxiety. So there's one question that says, lately I've been feeling anxious all the time, especially when I'm alone. Things are not well at home, and I feel like I'm left without a base, totally without support for myself. Even the happy memories from childhood hurt more, knowing that we had so much at that time, like ignorance, health, time, and most of all, we had each other. So, Dr. Bhide?
Yeah, so it's a very broad-based question, really. Anxiety was so common soon after the Second World War. They called it the age of anxiety. Okay. The important thing over here is there is nostalgia over here. There is a preoccupation with what in Kannada we would call Gata Vaibhava. Things were so good and now we've lost them all, lamenting for the lost past, which is never going to come back on its own. Okay. So this is defeating your purpose of being in the here and now. Some degree of nostalgia attends on our lives, and we should be a little romanticize the past and say, oh, those were such splendid times. Especially at my age, this happens much more commonly. Life was so simple and all. Life was so straightforward. Now you deal with the here and now. Those days are not going to come back. So I think it's important that if you are in a position where there is no support available from your home anymore, you're going to have to find social support of a different kind. But please don't become the complainer. Otherwise, your friends will slowly start shunning you, saying, oh gosh, here comes the sad story, here comes the narration of tragedies and how terrible life is for her. I don't want to deal with her anymore. Avoid that kind of situation. but open up and look at other stuff that does not make you anxious. It could be movies, it could be a hobby you've taken up, whether it's knitting or crochet, or whether you've taken up carpentry or genre gardening. And I think everybody needs a hobby to engage in creativity. Gardening is one excellent hobby, because in gardening, almost invariably, you see good growth in front of yourself, provided you're doing it sincerely and with some degree of reasoning. If you just keep 2 potted plants and water them whenever you find the time, then that's not really gardening. Take the trouble to see growth in front of you by way of a creative hobby where you engage. Now, creative hobbies, I mean, for example, taking up a musical instrument, learning singing, writing, creative writing, keeping an aquarium, looking after a pet. There are lots of pets that need rescuing. I don't know whether your hostels allow that. And most importantly, gardening. Take up cultivating cacti, cultivating, what do they call those? You might be able to prompt me, those bonsai. I know of a young lady who does bonsai gardening, and she's started with baby steps, does an excellent job of it. Cultivating medicinal plants, even cultivating betel leaves and tulsi and bale patti. These are things which need your attention, and you see growth before you. And I think that helps a lot for positive mental health.
Okay, so we have another question on anxiety. The question is how to reduce or remove anxiety, or how to deal with it.
By the way, I digress, and I didn't touch anxiety adequately. When anxiety is without any cause, we call it free-floating anxiety. And it can get attached to various stimuli from time to time. For example, you're anxious about whether the bus will come on time. Bus goes away without picking you up. You're anxious, when will the next bus come? Something or the other is driving your anxiety all the time. And if you're in that level of dysfunction with anxiety, it is time to take professional help. Professional help does not necessarily mean taking medication. I mentioned that creative hobbies can help give you a better sense of self-esteem and see growth before you, but also there are relaxation exercises that can help. Learning certain yogic practices can help you over a period of time to reduce anxiety. And visiting a clinical psychologist will teach you specific techniques of combating anxiety. One very well-known technique is called Jacobson's progressive muscle relaxation, which goes a long way in reducing anxiety in the long run. It does not immediately produce good results. Practicing meditation in the form of vipassana or transcendental meditation, mindfulness meditation, all these are practices that also help to reduce anxiety. But again, you have to give it regular practice and enough time.
That was an interesting answer. So the next question, I'll direct it to Dr. Aravind. Shouldn't access to euthanasia be a human right for all adults? Why can't an individual die by rational suicide? What are your arguments against rational suicide? I plan to kill myself by decapitation, either by train or long drop hanging, but I'm not mentally ill. I just have a different perspective on life. Why do people discriminate against me just because I don't believe life is inherently valuable? I wish I was born in Belgium instead, where I could have peaceful euthanasia, and that way I would have access to quick and painless death.
Okay. Fine. It is, I won't say an interesting question. It is something little alarming, because considering the kind of, the content of the question coming from a person. But let me try to, give my perspective. See, euthanasia, he is talking about euthanasia. Euthanasia is something which is approved in some countries for reasons. There is no other way. There is a lot of pain for the person. So he is given that right. When it comes to psychological issues, even from the law point of view, the recent Mental Health Care Act 2017 has decriminalized this suicide for reasons. If the attempt of suicide itself is an indication that the particular person is under some psychological problem or stress, for which there is enormous amount of help available. only point here is due to various reasons, which also includes lack of awareness as well as stigma, people are not coming forward to seek that help. Probably whomever has asked this question, I would also ask the question back. Is it that how many attempts have you made to seek help in this kind of psychological problem? Probably yes, when we say there is no problem or there is no way out, or when you feel there is no way out even after, probably that is the time, probably I say that that's the time to think of even this question. That's where seeking help is something which is missing, especially in mental health and especially for psychological issues, which we need to keep insisting. We mental health professional, how much ever we talk about seeking help, it's not going to happen. Like organizations like yours, I really appreciate this kind of efforts. This is what will make people to talk about it. Unless they talk about it, see, because there is no other what to say forum for this particular individual to talk about the problems. This is coming in the way of distress. I look at it as a professional, I look at it as someone who's having a kind of distress where he is not able to talk about it, is posing this particular question. So we would always, even we can start helping that particular person, with your support. We can talk to him and find out what exactly is disturbing. Then probably we can think about it. He has put the question in a philosophical way, but I look at in a perspective that he also might have some distress, which we can always discuss and then think about various options.
Yes, Dr. Bhide, I would want you also to answer this question. I should also add that the student has given a lot of it seems like a well-researched question where the student talks about value of life and a lot of other things. Like I did not read the entire content in the interest of time.
Yes.
Yeah. So, Dr. Bhide, I would like you also to weigh in on this topic and see if you have any other inputs.
I say this this much, that I don't think any health professional is ever really going to advocate death for this particular person, either by way of suicide or assisted suicide, what we call euthanasia. Now, euthanasia is a huge topic. I don't think we can cover in a question and answer session like this adequately at all. There will be differing opinions within the House itself if we take a vote. I have sometimes felt that euthanasia is justified when there is a terminal illness for which no cure is available and progressively the suffering has gone on increasing. Would I extend that to the realm of depression? Because we have a lot of cases of intractable depression, but new discoveries keep coming up, unfortunately not as frequently as we would like. But I don't think any self-respecting health professional is ever going to advocate death. He may advocate various forms of support, but he will not advocate death. And yes, life is sometimes so drained of meaning, so drained of color, so drained of flavor that one thinks, oh gosh, poor person, he's suffering so much. Should we let him go? There was a lovely play called Whose Life Is It Anyway? Taking off on the show that was called Whose Line Is It Anyway? Whose Life Is It Anyway? So my personal freedom to decide whether I should live or not, definitely a valid concept at one level. At another level, if I am the health professional who encounters this person, I might even, sorry to be so intrusive, I might even say that no, against his will, I will grab him and try and put him into treatment. The treatment may be very extreme and even in the form of electroconvulsive therapy, if I may think that this person is severely depressed, because we know that in severe depression, such a treatment, and I want to emphasize this point, that shock therapy has a very bad name in the general public. In fact, in my life, in my professional life of 33 years, I have seen at least 100 people whose life has been saved because shock treatment was given to them at the right time with the right kind of judgment. Now, shock treatment is one extreme form of treatment, or believed to be extreme, but there are other forms of treatment and there are other ways of philosophically handling life rather than running away from the escapist route that euthanasia and suicide seem to suggest to me. Having said that, I must also confess that suicide among health professionals is much more common than in most other professions. Unfortunate fact, because the amount of frustration that is felt. I don't think this research has been updated from the 1970s, when it was found that psychiatrists have a highest rate of divorce, alcoholism, and suicide. Why? Because the amount of stress they deal with in their lives is sometimes detrimental to their own health. On the other hand, it could be that people with unsound mind gravitate to this subject, and therefore they manifest these pathologies. To come to this very violent fantasy this individual seems to entertain, I wouldn't say fantasy, it could be a plan, to decapitate himself, I would say, why, if at all, even if you're thinking of suicide, why such an extreme method? I guess the reasoning is that there should be absolutely no hope whatsoever. I had a very, very dear friend, a creative artist, who jumped from the 7th floor to his death. I have still not been able to forgive myself, because just before that we had planned that we would start him on a course of shock treatment. But before we could even embark on this, he had ended his life. To this day, I regret the fact that I allowed him to go home and come back for the shock treatment, which I should never have done. So, am I going to endorse this person's idea? I agree with you, very well researched, philosophically thought out, and I will say that there are even health professionals, including mental health professionals, including some top psychiatrists, who say that yes, euthanasia should be allowed. He mentioned he mentioned Belgium, I think. There are certain states in North America, in US, and if I'm not mistaken, Australia also, where assisted suicide is now very much part of the regime. I will not endorse it. I will not endorse it. And I'll tell you something, I am saying this from a personal point of view because I've had to deal with terminal illness in my own family. And my terminally ill relative had thought of this, but I would never endorse that. I live on hope. If that hope is fulfilled, well and good. If that hope is not fulfilled, got to live with it, hoping for a better cure.
So the next questions that I would go to are about assertiveness. We have got a few questions about this, but I'll combine them into one question in the interest of time. So so like one of the questions is that like how do I honestly express myself? And like I cannot like there are other questions that say that I cannot do that because I'm scared because I will be neglected by the social group or I end up lonely. And in another question, the student says that like they feel dominated because like people around them reach out to them to get some work done, but like the more they do it, the more they reach out, and like so the student is unable to like draw a line and say no. And the student also feels like people around them are like dominating over them. So yeah, how would you go about this, Dr. Bhide?
I'm just reading the question again. Why do I always feel dominated? Just because I do not swear, other people or a specific person tend to prove his point just because of abusive and offensive language. Now, if somebody is learning to score points by using that kind of language, and I'm astonished when I watch Netflix and Amazon Prime, no serials that have been made after 2012 is free of the F word and the S word. It is as though they survive on their ability to bandy these terms around. You effing so and so, it's all shitty. That's the kind of language. Don't fall for that. That does not show any great degree of competence or validity or modernness or virility. None of that. So I'm glad if you do not swear, continue not to swear, please. That much elegance in language is called for, and we are losing it. Don't be one of those losers. Because of let it go mindset, I do not say much. If you are genuinely letting it go, then you won't have this question. But I think you are practicing at one level some degree of letting go, but it's really clinging to your mind much more than you're willing to admit. There are bullies in our lives, as I mentioned in an earlier context, and there are evil bullies and there are unwitting bullies. Unwitting bullies are those who end up being in a bullying manner of living without quite realizing the harm that they are doing. But do not get scared to say no. You may face some degree of isolation. You may face some degree of ostracism. It is worthwhile in the long run. In the short run, you may feel very lonely because these people say, hey, this person does not mix with us at all. He's not at all fit, or she is not at all fit to be with us. That may happen. But if you have sterling values in yourself that you cherish, please allow those to grow in yourself. Speak to me about it, because I need to see more and more of these people who have strong values, so that we can create more awareness of strengths to these values, rather than cheap values where it's cool just to be popular, use any kind of language and carry on. And I'll tell you, many of these people who engage in this kind of behavior, the cool behavior, are people who are time wasters. They waste their own time and they waste the time of others. And these are really not friends worth having in the long run. Social acquaintance is hi-bye kind of nodding acquaintance, fine. Occasionally enjoy a smoke or a drink with them, fine. But these are not people who have any great value as individuals that you would like to entertain as your long-term friends. So do not be scared to be isolated for some time. In the long run, you are going to emerge the victor, is my feeling.
Do you have any tips for people to be more assertive and like draw firm boundaries?
First, learn to look people in the face. Do not shy away from this, because these bullies stare you down and make you feel then you can't meet them in the eye. And the first step in assertiveness is making good eye contact. After having made good eye contact, to speak your mind in a gentle fashion as much as possible. If gentleness does not work, you've got to be firm. Hey, you're wasting your time and mine. I'd like to get on with my lab work, or I have this assignment to complete, or I need to go to the library. No, I don't want to hang out with you unnecessarily. I will come with you, but I will not have a drink. A lot of young people, I'm seeing more and more of this now, young people who say, you know, Doc, I don't like to drink, but the peer group that's with me, they say, I mean, I don't want to feel like the sore thumb in that whole lot. If I don't drink, what will people think of me? But I'm very ashamed of this. My parents would frown on me. I said, do you enjoy your occasional drink? Confession, I do enjoy my occasional drink. But if this person is not enjoying his occasional drink, it's not worth going there just to keep up with the Joneses, to keep up with the peer group. So be assertive at a one-to-one level to begin with. This person also mentions, interestingly, that he is uncomfortable in a group, even a group of two. Two, we generally call a pair, not a group. But I think this person is one of those. I spoke about solitude. He or she seems to enjoy being by herself or himself. If that is the case, let him quietly but firmly, not quietly, in few words, say that, look, I like to be by myself. Once in a while, if I want to come out with you guys, I will say so. But if I'm by myself, I'm quite happy with that. I have nothing against you, but I don't necessarily want to mix. If, on the other hand, there is a sense of loneliness and wanting to mix, but is masquerading as somebody who enjoys solitude, that can be quite pathological and damaging in the long run. So first, introspect, find out, are you one who is lonely, or are you one who is social phobic, or are you one who genuinely enjoys solitude?
I think these are some really good tips. So the next question is from a student who seems to be stuck in another toxic work environment condition. They say, my advisor doesn't like me and he tries to make my life a hell. He doesn't say anything directly, but he's very passive aggressive. I don't know what to do, because if I try to bring this issue about his behavior, he just denies it and says that you are imagining things. This is some next level of mental torture that I didn't expect from such a highly educated individual. The level of bad behavior that I have seen from such educated people in such an institute of eminence is shameful. Can you please advise how to maintain sanity in such situation? Complaints of bad behavior, if made to the department heads, are usually ignored or buried under some fake inspirational speeches that minimize the mental harassment experienced by students. Professor Anil, I think since you are here, I would want to bring these complaints to your notice also, because So first let's have the professionals weigh in, and then Professor Anil, I would want you to mention what can be done in the institute in such cases.
Yeah. So I think grand speeches of inspiration serve a very small purpose. They don't solve the problem at all. So I think we have to acknowledge the fact that bullying happens not only between peers. Bullying happens in a hierarchical mode much more. So you have a guide or an advisor or a professor who makes you feel small, makes you feel disliked, definitely needs handling. On the other hand, we have to be cautious because there is a phenomenon called paranoia, that you feel that people are against you, you feel that people don't like you, for which there is not an adequate basis. To such a person, I would say, list the instances, specific instances which you have noticed, which you have encountered, which make you feel that the superior person, the person in a superior position, I should say, actually dislikes you. What is it that, how do you justify your notion that this person dislikes me? Is it that he never finishes correcting your assignment in time, doesn't give you advice when he's supposed to be your advisor, has spent much more time with your peer group rather than with you? If you have specific instances of this, then your assertiveness might come into play over here, and you sit down and say, sir or madam, these are the instances I'd like to quote to you, which is why I feel that I am being neglected, I am not being liked, my genuine queries are not being adequately addressed. Please look into this. If at that stage you do not get enough of a response, you have to escalate the matter. Just as when we make a complaint to customer service and the person handling our call is not addressing our issue, we say, please escalate this call, let me speak to your supervisor or the higher person. I would go right up to the director, and I know that in specific instances, I have had situations where the director, at that time at least, was very willing to take on the issue and try and handle the situation, including reallocating you to another advisor or even reallocating a part of your work to a different institute. That much of a healthy atmosphere, in some measure, did obtain in IISc that I was aware of. I'm talking about instances about 2 years ago. And eventually the person did reasonably well in her life as a PhD scholar. Now she's completed a PhD in a different institute. But I will agree that sometimes the awkwardness of the situation is handled by superiors in a ham-handed way, that instead of addressing the issue at hand, don't worry, he actually likes you, things will be all right. This also happens, and I don't know that I can answer it. I think it's right that you directed this question to Professor Anil.
So just to add on to it before Professor Anil chips in, like from the system point of view, like not just in case of student related issues, even in some other companies as such, like, you know, there is something called as harassment cell, but most of them are not even aware of it. You know, here, at least in institutions, not just for the student, even for the professors or even for the faculty, there should be a system where it talks about to do things. If this is the situation, these are all the things which has to be followed. It has to be informed to each and every student as well as each and every faculty. Because as sir was saying, sometimes it can be just a paranoia. That could be even part of mental illness. But faculty should be in a position to address that. You know, they should be having that reporting system from the beginning so that they need not be accused unnecessarily. On the other hand, suppose if the faculty has real issues with the student, whether student has enough that system to report from the beginning, so that it will be taken. A lot of reassurance happens with the students, because most of the time, as it is told here, student will be feeling very scared to even report this, so that system should allow this particular student or even the faculty to know what exactly has to be done at different stages of these kind of complaints, so that they will feel reassured, and that itself make them to feel happy being part of the system, and they will be in a position to report that. Yeah, this is what I thought I will add on to that, because it's more of a system based thing. Yeah.
Yes, Professor Anil, do you have, yes, I would like to hear your inputs about.
Yeah, sure. See, Vinaya, see this particular question I've listened, you know, the Institute is also aware of such issues. And in the last few communications from the director to the faculty, this aspect has been very much emphasized. And if you remember correctly, the last communication from the registrar to all students also, this fact has been very much emphasized, that there should be a healthy mentor-mentee relationship. And different people perceptions are different, so this is a perceptual issue as well. In order to mitigate this problem, we will be soon having, and we are working with Dr. Bhide to arrange this. We'll have sensitization workshops for all faculty members of IISc. And also, see, for example, if you look at the problems, and Dr. Bhide is also aware of some of the problems that students or difficulties the students are facing. And considering all these things, there will be sensitization workshops to all faculty members in the campus, and also helping faculty members to identify different areas where a good mentor-mentee relationship, what are the ingredients for that, and also learning to identify and assess the skills of the students which is necessary for research, and then reassuring the students. All those kind of trainings will be happening pretty soon. You will see that it's not even a month later, it is within that time this will be done. And the faculty and administration is aware of some of these issues, and there will be adequate measures to make sure that the students' grievances are addressed.
I would only add that we're just starting on this, so don't expect overnight changes. It will take time by the time this percolates to actual action, but we're making a start.
I think, Professor Anil, I think like Dr. Aravind mentioned, I think as of now, according to my knowledge, there is no institute level harassment committee that students can report to, or if it is, the students are not aware of it. So I think having such a committee would be helpful, because if you look at the questions, there are multiple instances of students being bullied and harassed like in lab by their fellow lab mates or professors. So yeah. Sudhir, were you saying something?
Yeah, just to add to that point, that as recently communicated through registrar's mail, that communicated with all the faculties that work-life balance should be maintained and all. But when I recently asked one faculty that whether it is communicated to you or not, so the faculty just simply replied that there are many faculties present in the meeting, so they don't used to listen properly, and they don't actually know about all these things. Means they have attended, and so I think these things should be communicated properly, and should be, as Professor Aravind mentioned, that sometime the redressal form should be there, that the student can give feedback that whether work-life balance is maintained and all. So it is communicated through administration, but it might not be conveyed to all the faculties and all.
See, actually, the director in his message to all the faculty members, these aspects have been emphasized. We had a joint faculty meeting, and even before that, a meeting of administration to all chairs of the departments. This has been done, but this will be much more formalized. Even today also, there are a grievance addressal mechanism in the campus. See, for example, many students are changing guides from, not many, some students are changing guides from one faculty to another faculty. So that is happening through a mechanism, and always the deans are available for this kind of discussions. And also there is a students committee, headed by Professor Bhide, and student members are in that committee. And this committee is looking for all kind of grievances also. So the problem is that many a times this information need to reach the right people. Suppose, there is no monitoring mechanism in each lab how things are happening. So unless the students from that lab give this, information to the concerned people, this information will not come out. See, if you look at the students advisory committee headed by Professor Bhide, where student council members are also present and other faculty members are also present, is the forum where students can approach and then give their difficulties. Similarly, the Dean of Science for the students from the Faculty of Science, and the Dean of Engineering for the students of engineering faculty, also I'm aware that in many cases they intervene and change the student from one guide to another guide. If you listen to Dr. Bhide, the previous case he was talking about is
Thanks a lot, Professor Anil, for mentioning all the resources that are available in IISc for students who are in those situations. And like any student who is in the team, like if you feel like you need support from peers, like the peer support group Empaths is there, so please reach out to us. Right. And the email ID is given in the chat box. So let's assure that you receive support, sufficient support to deal with these issues. So there's one more question that is, okay, I'll read it. I feel like I'm caught in the same circumstances over and over again, and I'm unable to move forward in a relationship. I could see that awkward circumstances were repeating themselves, and I didn't want to think about it or face it for a long time. So I engage myself with some useful work. Why is this the case? Is it because I have deep feelings for him, or am I afraid of being alone for the rest of my life? I don't understand, because even with my advisor, I have the same issue where he says hurtful things regarding me and my work, and then makes it up later by stating, I have been having some mood swing difficulties. I'm beginning to believe that repeating these events is making me emotionless. I'm not feeling anything good or bad with them, and time is ticking away, and there's no solution to this problem.
First, stop believing that there is no solution to the problem. It's very good that you have recognized that your emotions are, in a sense, deadening. So an emotionless life for a long time is not something you want at all. I think there is an admixture of different aspects of your emotional life that are coming up in this question. One is with regard to the boyfriend, the other is with regard to the advisor. I will take the latter issue first because it's much more easily handled. Your advisor has no business to unburden on you to say that, I have mood swings and, I have some mood swing difficulties. To this, you should say, Professor so-and-so or Mr. so-and-so or Dr. so-and-so, I think you need to have professional help. I will not be able to help you in this. I wish you well. And leave it at that and see that he does not come up with this excuse for his totally unwarranted bullying behavior, which may again not be conscious, but subconscious, what should I say, unwitting bullying that he is engaging in. And I think if this goes on, you should report this case anonymously or with your identity, A, to Empaths, or B, to the wellness committee. I think that's very, very important, that you should not be victimized by this. Now, with regard to your boyfriend, yes, and most of you are in your early adulthood, and this is the time at which romance blossoms in many people's lives. To feel that I'll be left behind if I don't have a life partner is a very common phenomenon. But please check, is this the right partner for you? Is this a relationship you'd like to take forward? I don't understand exactly what you mean by saying unable to move forward in a relationship with a boyfriend. Is it that there is a certain degree of stagnation? Have you all been spending what we, in my college days, we used to say 24/7 service, Those days 24/7 was not such a common idiom as it is today, but we were pioneers in using that. Boyfriend and girlfriend continuously in each other's face. They have nothing else to look at in the world. And sure enough, after a few years, that couple broke up because they had cut themselves off. Both had different talents, both had different personalities. They were very nice together in short intervals, but most of the time, nobody could penetrate this barrier that they had imposed around themselves. They were locked up in their relationship, and that is not generally a healthy sign. So I don't also understand this bit about, so I engage myself with useful work. If the work is useful, you should be happy about it. But if you're engaging in work to distract yourself from the relationship, there's something that needs to be done about it. Have you talked to close and wise friends? And this is a point I've repeatedly bringing up in different contexts, that a good peer group and good members of the peer group who have some wisdom, which you respect, can go a long way in helping you sorting things out. You don't necessarily have to escalate this to professional help. You can take each other's word for it, work on it, tell your boyfriend, this is what I don't like about our relationship. There's a lovely line, sorry, I'm a quotational wisdom guy. Khalil Gibran in his books, in his famous book, The Prophet says, may there be spaces in your togetherness so the winds of heaven can dance between you. You should not be so closely cloistered in that relationship that nothing else comes into your life. You don't go for movies with anybody else. You don't hang out for a coffee or a drink with anybody else. It's only you and he and you and he and you. That can really cause a certain degree of, what should I say, a bondedness which is unhealthy. And you become bonded laborers without realizing it, bonded to each other. Very, very unhealthy trend on the whole. But if you're doing useful work, and tell him that when I did this useful work, it distracted me from worrying about our relationship, and I think you should also be doing the same thing. I don't know whether this boyfriend is somebody on the campus or somebody outside the campus, but both of you need your spaces in that togetherness so that you also have other meanings in life. Sure, you should be faithful to each other if you are looking for a relationship and willing to commit yourselves in the long run. Nothing wrong with that. And the fear of being left alone is something which, left without a partner is something very genuine, which alone in this. And there is no guaranteed method to say that this relationship will work out, that relationship will not work out. Your mental maturity, the other person's mental maturity, your ability to help each other grow are the factors that count a lot.
Yes, thank you for the answer. And I'm looking at the time and it is 5:56. You said you have to leave by 6. So is it okay if I squeeze in one question here that I would direct to Dr. Bhide?
Yeah.
Yeah. So the question is, I have been diagnosed with mood disorder by my counselor recently, and she suggested me to consult a clinical psychologist or a psychiatrist to get a proper diagnosis. She suggested that I might be having PMDD or bipolar disorder. I have a few questions. How to distinguish between the two, and how much of this should I share with my PI, being the guide? And will I be able to lead a successful academic life with this disorder, or do I need to think of alternate career options?
No, I don't think you should. The last question is extremely unlikely that you'll have to think of an alternate career option. People with bipolar disorder have gone on to become presidents. I'm not talking about the obvious example, but there are very good presidents also who have had bipolar disorders. There are people who have become CEOs and very effective leaders in different aspects of, in different realms of society, in spite of bipolar disorder. Don't think of a career change straight away. You are in a premier institute. I think this is something to be prized, and by and large, the option of leaving should be the last on your mind. Okay. Now, I'm sorry, there's some disturbing sound. There is some construction going on close by that I alluded to in the form of a remark to an earlier question. How to distinguish between the two? Even the most seasoned of clinicians can sometimes see an overlap between these two. PMDD can be a manifestation of bipolar disorder in a minority of cases, not in a majority of cases. A good clinician should be able to help you make the distinction. You will not be able to make the distinction yourself. And you've seen what I presume is a professional counselor who himself or she has already given you these two possibilities. Go to the clinician. Do not start with telling them that the counselor has said these two and you've come for this distinction. Present your clinical story to the professional, clinical psychologist or psychiatrist. Both of them can help you make the distinction or see if there is an overlap between these two conditions for yourself. How much should do I need to share with my PI? I think
advisor.
I got that. I think it will be a good idea, provided your advisor is somebody who has more than a shade of empathy and willingness to make allowance for the fact that you have mood disturbance, very transient in the case, relatively transient in the case of PMDD, Much more marked in the case of bipolar disorders when you're in your M or D phase. Bipolar means manic or depressive. One of those phases might be attending on your life. And at that time, the person should make allowance for these disorders. But very likely that if you've seen a good clinician, that you are going to be put on a regimen of treatment, largely pharmacological, but partly psychotherapeutic. And that will help you to cope with this or these conditions much better. Do not delay.
Yes. Thanks a lot, Dr. Bhide, for all your answers and being present with us in this meeting. It was a pleasure having you. And Dr. Aravind, if it is okay, could we extend the session for 10 to 15 more minutes? We have a few questions that we would like to answer.
Sorry, your voice dropped several times. I didn't follow what you last said, Vinaya.
Oh, so I asked Dr. Aravind if we could extend the session for 10 to 15 minutes with just him, since you have to leave now. We have a few more questions that need to be answered. So.
There's one thing, I mean, people may not understand what PMDD is, so I'll just expand that a little. It's premenstrual dysphoric disorder, which means around the time of your menses, most commonly just before the menses. It happens to ladies in the childbearing age. The mood just goes for a 6 and it becomes a very unpleasant mood, generally speaking. It resembles depression, but it may not fulfill depression. There may be angry outbursts, there may be sulking, there may be weepiness. The person cannot understand it or attributes it to stresses in the person's life, which are not actually so major or which are not actually the cause. But my boyfriend didn't smile at me, that's why this happened. My book was lost, that's why this happened. Actually, that loss of the book or the not finding the book is not the real reason. The real reason is hormonal storms that are occurring in this person's life. So that is what PMDD is about. And PMDD can, as I mentioned, in a significant minority of cases, overlap with bipolar disorder. Bipolar is where the mood tends to fluctuate between extremes of sadness or extremes of excitability and irritability. Vinaya, hang on till it's time for me to go, okay?
Oh, all right.
I'll say bye now, but I may suddenly disappear.
Sure. So the next question is, what are the things that I should know when I'm dating a person who is schizophrenic? What are their needs and how can I support them?
My question again is like, how do you say the person is schizophrenic? Is it a colloquial term you use or something which is, diagnosed and he divulged? We are not really sure about it, because sometimes a person who doesn't talk to people, we generally call them as he's schizophrenic, in a very layman's term. Is it that way, or what is that it is being? We are not really sure about it.
Yes, I think we don't have those details.
Yeah.
Let's presume that the person has come and told his girlfriend that I'm seeing Dr. So-and-so. He has told me that I have schizophrenia. I'm on treatment for that, but I want to be in a relationship with you.
Okay. See, in that case, generally, when we talk about relationship in terms of mental illness, even to some extent, people talk about marriages, being in relationship. It depends on how much the partner understands the illness. And sometimes, even in case of what you were discussing in the previous question, how much sensitive we are to this particular illness, how much we are sensitized. It is always, it is not that, a person with mental illness should not be in a relationship, not necessarily, because though it is a diagnosable illness, it need not be always a person with a diagnosis of mental illness should be always with symptoms. There are people who are diagnosed, but they lead a very good life and their functioning is much, much better than a person who is so-called not mentally ill, So in that case, yes, I look from a strength perspective. In that case, yes, they need to go ahead with that relationship. And I'm sure in this context, definitely there will be some sort of the duration where there is some difficulties with this person. So the person who has asked this question should be open enough to take help of the professionals with the particular person whom he or she is referring to, so that in a long run, that will be really helpful, not just for the person who has illness, but also for the relationship. In fact, this is what we are actually asking for, because in the family context or in a relationship context, that social support is something which is missing in mental illness. So that is something which is really important, and it is up to the person, to provide that help in the form of providing social support and helping them in difficult situations. And we as professionals can offer as much as support possible for the persons who are, who are in relationship or taking care of the person with mental illness.
Right. If I may
so
add,
the next question is, yes,
Vinay,
please.
I wanted to add something. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that was a very good answer that provides all the inputs that are necessary. And meeting the professional who's treating the partner is a very good step to take to find out what are these persons' strengths and limitations, and where would you have to make allowance. One common thing that happens with schizophrenia, as we know it, is a tendency to be paranoid, a tendency to feel persecuted, and the persecution may sometimes turn against the life partner himself or herself. That's very, very common. So you have to make accommodation for that. The person may hallucinate, the person may be deluded, and you have to make allowance for that. When is this person? You have to be the compass that guides this person through life to say this is real and this is your imagination, but you have to do it in a very discreet, diplomatic way without hurting the person's feelings. I would urge this person to see that good old movie, Beautiful Mind, where the outstanding Nobel laureate person suffering from schizophrenia, John Nash, his life was made so much more meaningful, apart from his individual brilliance. The fact that he had a life partner who at one stage divorced him, but again came back into his life and made his life much more meaningful and laced with achievement because she stood by him. So that's when Aravind spoke about speak from a position of strength, that's what appealed to me, that the way, I forget her name, John Nash's wife, stood by him to make his life more meaningful and one of great achievement. You may not get Nobel Prizes. Everybody, very few Nobel Prizes exist anyway, but you could achieve a lot more when you have a good life partner, a devoted life partner.
Yes. So the next question is how to manage stress. Whenever I try to give a presentation or stage performance, my legs start
I'll
shaking.
take leave now. I'll take leave. Sorry.
Sure. All right. Thank you. Thanks for your presence.
Aravind, I'd like to reach out to you afterwards. Anil, I'll take leave now. Bye.
Sure, sir. Sure.
Bye, everybody. Sorry,
Definitely.
I have to leave because I've got my call for the next meeting.
Okay, thank you.
Sure. Thank you. Bye. Yes. So, Dr. Aravind, the next question is how to manage stress. Whenever I try to give a presentation or stage performance, my legs start shaking and my voice starts scrambling.
All right. See, when we talk about these managing stress, there are two things. One is stressor and stress reaction. For example, in this context, addressing someone or addressing a large gathering or getting into this kind of, the programs, that is the stress creating situation. But not for, this situation is not a stress creating situation for everyone, which means not all situations are similar. Not all situations are similar in terms of inducing stress for everybody. Then how do I know that I'm under stress? This is a general answers for all the situations, because this is exactly what is being encountered by different people in different situations. Probably the person who was asked here, he is talking about standing in front of large gathering, having tremors in leg. Whereas somebody else would be very comfortable with this, but not able to talk to the opposite gender, single person. There they will be trembling. So here, see, the situations are different, whereas the reactions are going to be the same. So the first point in managing these stressful situation is that managing these reactions. Because how do I know that I am under stress? It is only based on the reactions, because most of the time we are not aware of these reactions. These reactions can be physical reactions, like this particular person was talking about, tremor. Somebody talks about sweating. Somebody talks about, cramps. or somebody talks about irritability. So these reactions has to be handled first. In this case, what we can do is we talk about, for example, even stage fear. I need to know, yes, I am getting, dryness of mouth. So let me handle the dryness of mouth first. I need to have a sip of water. Sometimes I can even tell the crowd like how anxious I feel. It is also very important. And sometimes we don't even carry a piece of cloth, handkerchief with us to, wipe out. And we don't even rehearse it. So what we behaviorally, what we say is we need to manage these stress reactions first, so that it will be easy for us to manage those situation which is inducing stress in a positive way. Majority of the time we forget to manage these reactions. When I know, like, yes, my, I'm getting dryness of mouth, I continue to talk, and that's where I blabber something. Let me have a sip of water. I know that, I need to take, and in fact, the same situation, I'm sure he also experiences not just the trembling of legs, but also very shallow breathing. That I need to have a deep breathing on myself. I need to practice that. Once when I manage these reactions, it helps my body and mind to handle that situation in a better way. And for example, one another behavior is, as I told you, in this context, having rehearsals, not just rehearsals about that particular song what they are going to sing, but also rehearsals of handling that stress reaction, like taking deep breath even before going to the stage, having a deep breath, talking about the anxiety to someone else. That really helps. I'm talking in this context, but this is the answer. It's a framework which holds good in all stressful situations.
All right.
Yeah.
So the next, yeah, so that was a question about social anxiety. And the
Yeah.
next question is, my mind fluctuates a lot. Currently, I'm in MTech. Sometimes I think I have to do PhD, but then I think to take other job, or like sometimes I think to completely switch career and take a degree in humanities. Earlier, I thought I would get answers to it after joining the institute, but now it's more problematic. I want to study or do a job in what I like, but it's so confusing to think of one path and follow only that for the rest of the life.
Okay. What we generally suggest is, even as part of mentoring or persons who come with different alternatives, probably this is a kind of win-win situation for you. But I would suggest the person to list out all the advantages of, first of all, to list out all the alternatives, to list out all the possible advantages of these alternatives, as well as the cons, the disadvantages. Then he is the person who has to choose the options which he feels, the alternatives which he feels, which has more advantages and less of the disadvantages. I'm sure none of the alternative will have only disadvantage or will have only advantage, but it is left to the individual to understand which has more of pros, that is the advantages, and less of disadvantages, which he has to put in his full effort to understand those. If he is finding it difficult, he can even discuss with others to know about the advantages and disadvantages of these things. He can talk to the seniors, or even he can talk to the faculty. Then, but the decision should be made by the person himself, by taking the help of others, by listing out the advantages and disadvantages. And one thing he has to follow is think a lot before taking those decisions, but do not, and I will again connect it to the previous questions, do not regret after taking a hasty decisions. But after taking the decisions, own the decision, take the responsibility for taking the decisions. And how you will be confident of taking the decisions? By doing this activity of listing out the advantages and disadvantages, and you would be the better judge about that, and you can take the help of others to list down the advantages and disadvantages. But it is you who's the one who takes the decision based on all these things, which is very important, and own that decision rather than trying to blame others. Of course, if you follow these things, definitely there are less chance for you to blame others, and at the same time there is less chance for those decisions to fail.
Thanks for the insightful answer. I have two more questions which I would like to direct to you, Dr. Aravind. So one of them is mental. Okay, how to deal with constant thoughts about not having done enough. I work 8+ hours most of the days and keep myself productive as much as possible, but somehow it feels like I'm undeserving of better things. When genuinely good things happen, instead of feeling happy, I question myself if I deserved it and did I do enough to get it.
Okay. But again, it depends on in what context and what is that he's trying to put on. But in general, as we were talking about that assertiveness as well as self-esteem, if we are not assertive on ourselves, we has to again think of what are all the different process he has undergone to reach here, and that actually helps him to justify him in that particular position. That he has to constantly keep doing that particular exercise, which will make him to feel that he was talking about, I don't deserve this. But if he thinks about it, and it also depends on the kind of level of self-esteem what he has about himself, that again he has to, if he is not able to handle things on his own, he can always feel free to discuss this in detail with the person, either one of us or your own team members. It will help him to have an understanding about why he has to be there or why he should not be there. When I say why he should not be there, when he feels that he doesn't deserve, there can be some sort of justifications he can give for why he is there. That is the process. When we make him talk about it, when we start asking few questions, that makes him to realize that, and that probably will help him to feel that he is doing things adequately. And it is not enough to be productive. And here again, the question what he asked also has answered that it's not enough to be productive. It is also important to feel fruitful about or feel happy about that productivity. So when we talk about mental health, it is just not absence of mental illness. Absence of mental illness doesn't mean that we are all mentally healthy. Mental health itself is something to do with not just how productive we are, but also how fruitful we feel about it and how happy we feel about it. So that's the component we need to he has to think about.
Yes, and I think this question seems like a very common problem in academia, and I think imposter syndrome in academia is a well discussed topic. So, we could, I mean, request the student to look up to it, and because I think if they're feeling that they're definitely not alone, and in academia it's a very common problem. So
Yes.
that is one more thing that I would like to add.
That's what we
And
generally tell even our own trainees and students, to keep a documentation of what all things they have done through that year or whatever it is. Whenever they feel low about themselves, they can just go through it. Ajit sir was talking about journaling. Journaling is about the overall life events, whereas here documenting about what things we have achieved even in the academics, or even in terms of whatever the publications, whatever it is. Have a look at it. That gives us a sense of satisfaction, which will push us to go further.
yes. So there's one more question that I would like to address to Dr. Dr. Aravind. Mental health problems arising due to some real life problems which cannot be solved by individuals. Like, how do you deal with them? So the student asked, when there are so many problems that you cannot solve, how do you expect the mental health to be good?
Okay. See, that's what, when I spoke when I was answering for the last question, there are three more components in mental health. Stress management or mental health is not about alleviating all those stressful situations. problems will be there. From birth to death, definitely there will be a lot of problems. I always give this example of a farmer for a small loan committing suicide, and Mr. Vijay Mallya having so much of loans, still having a happy life abroad. You know, the whole problem is here, in both the situation, loan is our issue. But how do we handle it? So coming back to the components of mental health, one component, what I said was in terms of being productive, just not being productive, how happy we feel about it and how fruitful it is. The other three components are, first one is how much I am aware of my own potentials. You know, that potentials definitely will be helpful in handling those problems, whatever the problems you are talking about. That potentials will be helpful in handling those problems in a positive way. And then how I manage my day-to-day stressors in a positive way. For example, going and talking to someone for a problem what you have in the family or for yourself is one of the strategy, or going and having a drink is another strategy. Let's understand which is more positive. I'm sure we will talk about persons who are going and talking to someone is more of a healthy strategy. So that stressor remains same for different people. In terms of even ending one's life, going and talking to someone is one strategy in that particular day-to-day stressor, and trying to end one's life is another strategy, which is more healthy. The problem remains same, but two different types of people are there. So those are the things. And then the last one is, what is my contribution to my society and the community? You're talking about so much of problems. So here, so much of problem. What is that I am doing to reduce those problems? That also improves my mental health. Living amidst that problem and facing those problems in a positive way also improves your mental health. And then contributing productively, and then contributing something to the society in this situation, even to alleviate that particular problem, also improves our mental health. So don't think that to have a better mental health, there should not be any problems. Problems will be there. How do we manage it? How do we actually perceive it? And how do we manage it matters in having a better mental health. The one who is managing it positively will move towards mental health. The one who is not able to manage it positively, probably not towards mental illness. First, they will move towards distress, and then they will move towards mental illness if it is not addressed on time. So please don't have that idea that we should live in a problem-free environment. That is not possible. So just to give an example, till we passed our 10th standard, we would have been thinking that, oh, this is a very hectic sort of subjects and all those stuff. But by the time we come to the college, we think that schooling was better. And when we go to work, then we will think that college is better. So there is no place where there is no problem. Problems are there. How do we manage it really matters.
Yes, thanks a lot, Dr. Aravind, for that answer. And thanks for joining us today. It was a pleasure having you, and many of the answers
Okay.
you gave are very insightful. And I think there's like one question I would like to ask it to you in a general way. Like this can also be your opinion, like before you leave. So there's a question that a student asked, like, what can the institute do to make the like to help the mental well-being of students on IISc? So do you have any like opinion to say about it before you leave? We would like to hear your thoughts.
Yeah, to see, this session itself is a good beginning. I'm sure that, as Anil sir was talking about, there are a lot of systems in place, but availability of system alone will not help. But how that system is being made use of by the end users. The end user is no one but the students. They should come forward. They should talk about, as they talk about their fever, they should talk about their mental health issues. And there, even they should be more assertive, talking about it, and need not feel bad, like, what others will think about, what my friends will think about it. If that's what I said, no, even if that systems are there, if someone is not making use of it, it is equal to non-availability of that system. So I would suggest, I would insist the students to be more assertive in terms of making use of the system. And definitely, if you are able to give suggestions, that will be taken by the system in a very positive way. It will be given back. And I'm sure IISc institutes like IISc and NIMHANS are all very pro-student sort of thing. But only thing is, the students should be open enough to discuss about the issues as such. And issues, when I say, it's just not about mental health issues. Mental health is not a separate entity. The mental health or well-being is affected because of all the other aspects. So those aspects also should be discussed. Okay.
Yes. Thanks a lot, Dr. Aravind.
Thank you. I think Vinaya is a little stressed out because of asking or coordinating the questions. Thank you for her as well, for patiently, trying to collate things and then trying to ask questions. Thank you once again. Yeah.
Yes, thank you. I would like to thank Sudeb also, who coordinated this event, and he did a lot of work. So I would like to thank him as well, and to Professor Anil and the Wellness Committee for enabling us to conduct these events. So I think Professor Anil, if you could stay back, there are a few questions here. There are two questions that are directed towards the administration, which I thought we could ask you. Would that be okay?
That's fine. That's fine.
Yes. So one, yes, Doctor.
Thank you, Dr. Aravind. We'll keep in touch. Yeah. So we will keep in looking forward for your further help in future.
Thank you. Sure. Thanks.
Thank you, Doctor. Yeah. So, Professor Anil, there are two questions. One of them says, work is difficult and collaborations are not spontaneous, and it is difficult to work all of it by yourself. There is very little time left till the grace period of campus life kicks off, with no research assistantship stipend. Should I fail to defend my degree by that time? It is connected to the deadline query, but in this case, there is a scope for the administration to aid scholars whose works have been hampered due to the pandemic. Not selective aid for a few specific scholars, but to all those who demand it. When shall the administration take a decision to address this state of crisis that has hit academia at large, but has been severely deadly for already vulnerable scholars?
Yeah, Vinaya, if you look carefully, last year and the year before that also, there were extension of deadlines for submission of thesis and other matters. And the previous years, it was with scholarship, it was enhanced. But IISc also works with the restrictions from the government funds, etc. So in that sense, if you look at it very carefully, the students in the 6th year is also getting something called a pension, which is generally not available at other places, but IISc is continuing to give the pension until there is a restriction that comes in future.
Okay, thank you. There's another question that is also a suggestion. So the question asks, why aren't more faculty members involved in discussions like these? Because the faculty themselves might be suffering from various mental health issues, and this could be what is making them abusive towards students. So should mental health evaluation of faculties be done compulsory to ensure that they are safe to interact with students, because the overall mental health of the campus depends on the mental health of faculty also?
Yeah, Vinaya, the point is that, as you know that even students and also the faculty, there's no compulsion for anything in the campus. There's something which is not mandatory. Here also you can see that, out of 12 people who are present here, I can see 3 faculty members. Right. So in that sense, I wish this meeting could have been attended by large fraction of students and large fraction of faculty members, but we cannot, make it compulsory. But if you look at it here, out of 12, I'm also seeing 3 faculty members, including me in this one. But the thing is that, with this awareness workshop that we are planning to conduct, we hope that things would become better. But, the facilities which is available in the campus is uniformly used by faculty, students, and staff.
Okay, thank you for answering that question, and all the previous questions that were directed towards you. And I think we haven't answered all the questions. There are still like 4 to 5 questions, I think, which we haven't answered.
We will have further sessions next month also, so we can take it up at that time. Yeah.
Yes. So I think we'll close for now. Thank you, everyone.
So Vinaya and Sudeep, can you just stay back for a couple of minutes? I just wanted to check something with you if it is possible.
Sure, yes.
Thank you. So Sudeep, we can stop recording also then. Yeah.
Okay.